between Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush 2 was pretty simple. It was we're going to enforce lawful immigration. We're going to enforce illegal immigration in that we're going to prosecute and expel people in the United States that were entered illegally.
Border security is national security.
Welcome to No Border, No Country. Our guest today has served as Chief of Staff for the Department of Defense, Deputy Director of National Intelligence, and a Deputy Assistant to former President Trump. He's written several books, and his latest is the bestseller Government Gangsters, which exposes deep state government corruption. Kash Patel, welcome to No Border, No Country.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on your show. Really looking forward to the conversation.
So, Kash, right off the bat, how have we gotten to this place where our borders are not enforced and our leaders prioritize foreign nationals over American citizens?
Well, I think your title of your show is how we got here. No Border, No Country is the policy that has led to this position. And it takes years to get to this position because we used to enforce the laws in this country, especially when it came to protecting our citizenry. But for some reason, those laws became a lightning rod, in my opinion, when President Trump started to enforce them to seal the border and to stop the drug trade and to stop child sex trafficking and to stop human trafficking and to stop the flow of CCP fentanyl. Those aren't political opinions. Those are facts. And he used the law on the books to do that. He didn't create any new policies in terms of legal text. He just said, we should secure our border. We don't want our children dying in our streets, and we want narco traffickers to not be in America. And I think if there was another president that had succeeded at the level that President Trump had, you would not have seen such a knee-jerk aversion to it, because what the media did was they politicized it. And whether you're a Republican or Democrat, this national security issue, this national security crisis is apolitical. And Biden came in and just said, well, we're going to have an open border. Now we have 10 plus million illegal immigrants, some of them committing murder, rape, drug dealing, killing our children with CCP fentanyl. And tragically, again, that's not a congressional move. It was just a decision via executive order and fiat to say we are not going to secure our border. And it's taken years, and I think people have now finally said, wow, it's impacting every community, every county in this country. And they see the two next to each other, and I think most Americans want security.
So do you think that we're in a cycle now where we're going to see this kind of waxing and waning of immigration enforcement as the various parties change and take the White House or Congress and then move on? Or do you think that the people who stay in government in the administrative positions have finally acknowledged the seriousness of the threat?
Well, I think the career government folks that have been in government, in law enforcement, in defense and intelligence, specifically to this issue, have always recognized it as a problem set. I've never known it not to be a national security issue. I've never known narco traffickers and child sex traffickers not to be a threat to national security. I've never known not having a sealed border so that known terrorists don't enter the United States to not be a national security issue. And those folks are the same. I was in for 16 years, but a lot of those folks did it for longer. They, unfortunately, some in leadership positions decided that since they didn't get the job done to the extent that it could have been done in terms of succeeding to seal our border, and that Trump did, they took political angst and personal, sort of, how can he do it and we didn't do it to it? And, that's a political discussion for others to analyze. But I think what happens now is that because Donald Trump succeeded before and because Joe Biden is failing now on the border, America is saying, wait a second, maybe these guys weren't wrong. Maybe DC and the leadership you're talking about, the careers, could have gotten this done sooner, but didn't. Now that corruption's been exposed. And also we've seen what a border, when it's sealed, what it looks like and who did that. And so it's just a collision of all these different things. I don't know that there'll be much of a hangover because I don't know any American that doesn't want a sealed border. So I think it'll go away once the border's sealed again, should President Trump win. But now at least every American that I see wants a sealed border.
Cash, based on your experience in intelligence and at the Defense Department, what is your reaction when you see these images of these military-age men from places like China, Iran, other terror states coming right across our border? And what do you see when that's happening?
I see our enemy taking advantage of the political buffoonery in Washington, D.C. to weaponize politics and intelligence and deprioritize the security of this country. Look, as a terrorism prosecutor, who prosecuted terrorists all over the country and around the world, we used intelligence and we prioritized intelligence to focus on where the terrorist threat is and who allies and adversaries are allowing them to flourish. And with the open border, to me, it's inextricably intertwined. Folks like China, Iran, Russia, Al-Qaeda, certain organizations in Africa have said, look, open border, open season. We're going to take our folks, our terrorists, and we're going to seed them into the U.S. illegally. And again, that's not a political statement. Just look at what Director Wray and Director Mayorkas of FBI and Homeland Security respectively said to Congress under oath 3 months ago. There have been at least 24 known foreign terrorist affiliates that have gotten into the country illegally, and the FBI and DHS don't know where they are. That fact is a stunning national security crisis. I believe the number to be much higher when the total number of illegals tops 10 million that we know about. But it shows to me that when you deprioritize intelligence collection against terrorists, and when you deprioritize tracking their movements around the country, our enemies are going to take advantage and say, you guys go to America, we're going to pay for you. Don't do anything now, maybe next year, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years. It's kind of like the pre-9/11 setup all over again. And that's not to be overly hyperbolic. It's just the reality. That's what they did then. And now we have known foreign terrorists in our communities. It's to me, I don't even know the word to describe what kind of policy would allow that Americans could say, oh, that's effective. That's what I want.
So I spent many years working for ICE. After you got finished prosecuting these people, I got them to get rid of them in deportation proceedings. And I know that when I looked at the files of these folks, it would keep me up at night. And just so that our viewers and the people who may happen upon this, wherever it's posted, understand, what is the nightmare scenario that you see developing if this continues to go the way it's going and no one starts to take it seriously and enforce the immigration laws that are on the books?
The nightmare scenario is sort of coalescing, I think, over the last couple of years as we speak. It used to be that the narco traffickers had their lane, that the human smugglers had their lane, the terrorists had their lane, and the CCP had their lane. Now they've all gotten smart and said, we could probably work together because we hate America. And we can combine forces. That is a lot of manpower, a lot of money, a lot of diversity in terms of American adversaries and enemies, and a wholesale threat to everyday Americans, which is what they want to inject. And so what I think the policies of this administration have done, unfortunately, is allow those adversaries like the CCP, like the drug cartels, like the kingpins, like the child sex traffickers, and like the folks that are producing fentanyl to get together down in Mexico mainly and say, hey, we've got a full-scale staging operation. We got the drugs, we got the people, we got the sex traffickers, and we got the fentanyl, and we can add terrorists to the mix and allow them to be illegally infiltrated into America through an open border. And I think that's the nightmare situation, that everybody says, who used to basically kill each other, is now saying, well, we'll put all that aside because we can't stand America. And that's the lane they found.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that there's strange bedfellows being created by this. And I was recently reading about the Chinese Communist Party is now selling the precursor chemicals and the equipment to make illegal fentanyl. And it's being paid for by the cartels with exotic seafood that's fished illegally out of Mexican waters, which is, whoever would have thought that you'd have seafood, the CCP, and fentanyl in the same sentence?
It's amazing, and most people don't realize that that's the trade-off. The CCP isn't really in it for the money, but they need seafood. It's not a surprise. You don't have to be a geographic wizard to know that the Chinese love seafood, and they'll get it from wherever they can. And the CCP's own government literally told our House Intelligence Committee in Congress last year, we're not in the fentanyl production business. We don't provide fentanyl to the United States. We just give the drug cartels the precursors, as you said. I mean, literally, that's what their official position to the United States is. We just give them the ingredients. If they make it, that's their own problem. And Joe Biden accepted that position. And what we have is 100,000 American youth died last year alone of CCP fentanyl overdoses. And they now see a lane, the CCP and the drug cartels, and whether it's through trading for seafood and precursors or whatnot, they're getting creative. I don't know what the next deal is going to be. Maybe it's more, maybe let's get to heroin and other rare earth minerals, and we'll swap for those. And then maybe we'll get into the weapons and the arms dealing. I mean, who knows, right?
Kash, one of the problems in this issue seems to be sanctuary cities, the sanctuary policies that serve as a magnet to bring a lot of these people across the border. And during the Trump administration, it seemed like they were the first ones to really make an effort to address this. And they were trying to withhold law enforcement grants to some of these cities, and they pushed back with litigation, and they seemed to blunt maybe some of the effects of that. Knowing that and knowing what we know now, what would you think would be a revised or improved strategy to deal with this sanctuary problem?
Well, now that the reality of the Biden administration policies has laid waste, in my opinion, to the old definition of border state, and now every state is a border state, because every state, just like my home state of Nevada out here, you don't have to be down south by Mexico to be a border state anymore and have its impacts directly affect your community, your children, and your citizens. And the sanctuary city policies were done by, New York and LA and Chicago and a lot of other small towns, liberal small towns, because they wanted to have an argument against Donald Trump's immigration policies. And if you take the root of that and say, why would we want criminals to hide here or to give them sanctuary? It's because that, in my opinion, they wanted to coalesce a voting bloc that they were going to need in future elections. And so buying people by giving them money, giving them a shelter, giving them a home, giving them voter ID, and caring for them over caring for the likes of, say, our 55,000 homeless veterans was the policy they went with. But what America saw as that policy rolled out during the Biden administration was sanctuary cities are imploding. There's, needles and drug crimes are through the roof. Murders are skyrocketing. Robberies and, as we call them, aggravated assaults and felony carjackings are up in every major city. And these sanctuary cities have now seen courthouses and police stations literally be torched and cop cars be firebombed. So most Americans will agree that that's not a community they want to raise a family in. And I think you're starting to see a sea change in this whole sanctuary city movement. And look, you don't have to believe me. Look at the sanctuary city mayors, places like the guy in Portland, Oregon, and otherwise. He just lost by 20 points. Or the district attorney, I think it was. I can't remember which position. But, the top cop in that town is now out because he championed sanctuary cities in one of the most liberal towns in America. So I think the empirical evidence speaks for itself that people don't want it. Even the guys that authored sanctuary cities now don't want it.
So one of the things that's always talked about with this is a, it's a game of election demographics to try and create voters. They're going to take a specific position. But it seems to me that that's a double-edged sword. And one of the things that I think may happen, and I kind of like your opinion on this, is a lot of the immigrants that came here lawfully seem to be getting really pissed off now because they have family members that they would like to get into the United States. And they see the government of the U.S. as prioritizing people who break the law, but also the government of the U.S. as importing the very problems that these people, in a lot of cases, fled their home countries from and bringing them into the U.S. So what's your opinion on how that's all playing out?
I think minorities across the board, and me being one, are having that same reaction, starting with just the minority population, because the minority population that performs so many of these services and jobs across the country is being supplanted as more and more illegals come in. And not just that, they're taking up more and more resources. So taxpayer dollars in your county, state, and federal government are being utilized to house illegal immigrants, are being utilized to house people who are committing crimes, and that money and those personnel are focused on redirecting your jobs from your community to them and away from minorities. So I think it's offensive to many minorities, blacks, Hispanics, Indian Americans, everybody, who are just like, wait a second, what happened? And on the immigration front, you're talking to a guy whose parents lawfully emigrated to the United States of America, waited in line, fled a genocidal dictator with nothing, and then grew up in America, living the American dream for their children. And they and us, and we are the biggest proponents of lawful immigration because we did it the right way. And you shouldn't get to skip the line because the politics of the day and their headlines are sort of in vogue now, and we can get away with having all these illegals here. I think lawful immigrants are more ticked off, maybe, than people who have been here for multiple generations, who have distanced themselves, just temporarily speaking, from immigration issues. But for us, for me, a minority who is living out the American dream, and we're seeing that dream, and this is what I said, I think, in the Temecula Stampede the other night, we're robbing future generations of that dream. We're robbing future immigrants of that dream, because they're probably looking over here and saying, well, why would I want to go to America now? Crime's through the roof. Illegals are favored. My family doesn't have that same American dream that I grew up reading about. They might go elsewhere. But I think that we can slowly regain the position from a policy perspective that lawful immigration in the United States is of paramount importance. And conversely, illegal immigration is of paramount importance to police correctly with the laws we already have on the books. We don't need any new laws. That's the thing. We just got to get the Washington, D.C. elite to allow cops, immigration, customs, CBP to enforce it. That's it. They're just not doing it.
When the Trump administration was implementing its immigration policies, this illegal immigration lobby launched this deluge of litigation against it to try to gum up the works, for lack of a better term. The next time we get a law and order president, how important are the courts going to be? How important is it going to be to have that counterweight against that lobby pushing all that litigation to slow down the progress?
Well, look, that's just it. So, the legal component is so critically important to the discussion we're having, because the policies in place that have disrupted and, I think, in my opinion, destroyed this country when it comes to immigration have not been challenged to the level that I would like to have seen them been challenged in courts. And when they are selectively going to districts and jurisdictions that are politically bent on one view. And we are seeing that play out even in places like Texas. And so what you're going to have to do, in my opinion, is this administration, the Biden administration, has changed the immigration platform by policy, by executive fiat. And the next president can come in and just say in one fell swoop, all of those EOs, all of those policies are hereby rescinded on day one. And then we don't, like I said, I firmly believe this. I don't think we need any new laws. We have the laws on the books we need to become a secure border nation again and enforce the immigration policies, laws that are on the books. What we don't have is a law and order commander in chief, in my opinion. And so I think once a law and order president is elected again, we should expect the radical left folks that have put forward these pro-sanctuary city, pro-illegal immigrant agendas to challenge any new executive orders that a subsequent president should have. But we shouldn't be afraid of that. None of the laws that are on the books that I'm aware of regarding immigration and lawful immigration and illegal immigration are unconstitutional. If they were, we would have heard about them. It's now they're just gearing up for the next level of fight, and all they have to do, in my opinion, is go to the media to gin up a scary headline like the next president's going to deport millions of illegals. Well, that's what the law requires. If this president didn't allow 10 million to stack up millions at a time, the subsequent president wouldn't have to deport millions of illegal immigrants in one fell swoop, because the subsequent one would be the one enforcing the law. And I think we have to go back to reminding Americans that that's the narrative. We're not the ones doing anything illegal or championing anything illegal when it comes to immigration. We're just asking for a commander-in-chief to put forward the law that's on the books and allow our cops to do it.
So what do you think it is that's different about immigration? It's always been shocking to me that states and cities would declare themselves immigration sanctuaries. And I just think if you flip the script on that, and if Texas decided it was going to declare itself a gun sanctuary, or something weird happened in Massachusetts and it was going to declare itself a whaling sanctuary and suspend the environmental laws, the vast majority of people would have a meltdown. And yet people seem to not only tolerate this whole sanctuary city nonsense, but there are a lot of people that somehow think that it's kind or good or right. And so what is it about immigration specifically that makes people think that it's different?
I think it's because the media has played a large role of disinformation when it comes to immigration, because of the politicized lightning rod that they in the media made immigration. If you go back to the 80s and the 90s, immigration between Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush 2, was pretty simple. It was, we're going to enforce lawful immigration. We're going to enforce illegal immigration, in that we're going to prosecute and expel people in the United States that were entered illegally. And then when President Trump came in and declared the border a national security mission, and when I was chief of staff at the Department of Defense, we utilized National Security Mission Force assets because it was declared a national security mission, a national security threat. And many in the government, the media said, you can't do that. And I said, well, I don't understand. The commander-in-chief gave a lawful command, and now we're not going to follow it because you disagree with how or who gave it. And that reality sort of collided with the disinformation campaign the media was putting out there, saying that this is somehow un-American to enforce the law that is on the books. And so when it came to the illegal immigration overlap with sanctuary cities, they projected a narrative that was actually illegal. They were pro illegal immigrants coming here and staying illegally and taking away resources from lawful American citizens and residents. But because the mainstream media controls so much swath of journalistic territory, they had their day. But I think their day is done. I think many Americans, mostly those in the middle who didn't participate in politics, are saying, listen, I'm done with the needles on the streets. I'm done with my kid being exposed to Chinese fentanyl. I'm done with my people who are my grandmother's age being raped and murdered. Like, that has no place in the United States of America, and there's no amount of media that can overcome that reality that has befallen America under the Joe Biden administration.
Kash, tell us about government gangsters.
Well, if you guys know me well at all, you know that I actually don't like reading or writing. But after 16 years in government, I thought it was important to highlight I'm a national security, defense, law enforcement guy. That's what I do. That's what I did, like you guys. And I wanted to defang some of the disinformation that had been out there. I was the chief investigator for Russiagate, exposed how the FBI got in bed with the Hillary Clinton campaign and lied to a federal judge for a political purpose. And I was like, that's unheard of in the United States of America. So we wanted to get it all in one place. So we wanted to recommend to everyday Americans how you fix ICE, how you fix DOJ, how you fix DOD, how you fix CIA, etc., how you de-weaponize law enforcement and not have a two-tier system of justice. But in order to do that, you have to identify the people, in my opinion, that held senior ranks in Washington, D.C., that didn't care about being a Republican or Democrat. They cared about feeding the swamp and the bureaucracy that gave them fame and will give them riches. And I identify a whole list of government gangsters, as I call them, in the back of the book, A to Z, literally everybody. Then I put in a whole host of reforms on whether it's stripping security clearances from people who lied and signed a 51 Intel letter regarding Hunter Biden's laptop just to rig an election, or whether it's how we reform personnel at FBI and DOJ, or what we do at DOD. And we put it all in one place. And we talk about a lot of the Trump national security law enforcement policies that worked in the book. And we actually took the government's own documents and we stuck them right in the book, because that's the best evidence of their corruption. We have to expose it. And that's why the Biden administration spent 10 months blocking the release of my manuscript. I actually had to go to federal court to get it. But I appreciate President Trump launched it to a bestseller. It's been out 6 or 7 months. It's still a bestseller. Order it today at Amazon or governmentgangsters.com. And a cool announcement, Government Gangsters, the movie, is coming out next month in collaboration with War Room Studios. So
awesome.
Really excited about that. And I appreciate you letting me talk about the book briefly.
Interesting. I was reading through it before we came on the air here, and no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, I think it's a great bit of information for anyone concerned about the corruption of Washington and the swamp and everything people complain about. It's all broken down in a very fine detail there. So you've done a great job, Kash.
No, thanks so much. And, without shows like yours, we wouldn't have audiences to speak to who need to be educated and then get out there and educate the rest of the masses about what I think is the most consequential issue of an election cycle, and that's national security. And to me, it's border, in terms of where we start and finish this thing. And so thanks to you guys for working with Tom and everybody to get our citizenry educated, at least arm them with the truth, and then let them vote how they want to vote.
Well, Kash Patel, I want to thank you again for your time and your expertise, and good luck with the book, and please come again.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thanks. So, Matt, your impressions on our interview with Kash Patel?
I think he was right on the money. I mean, this is somebody who was in the midst of all of this. He was anti-terrorism prosecutor. He was chief of staff at the Department of Defense. I mean, you can't find somebody who's had more real-world frontline exposure to these issues than him. And, he pointed out the thing that we say at IRLI all the time. We don't need any more laws. We just need to enforce the ones that are on the books.
Yeah. We've been on a roll here lately. We had Charles Marino last time, very knowledgeable, experienced guy, and now we get Kash. Yes. And, he's got a unique perspective working in the Pentagon and as well as national intelligence. So it's really fascinating to get the perspectives of these people because, from where we sit, we're somewhat dependent on the media filter to tell us what's going on in the world. But these are people that have seen that raw data. They see what's going on inside, like you did earlier in your career. And just to remind us how serious this problem is.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have those kind of voices. And, Kash was awesome. Charles Marino was awesome. We've also had Mark Morgan, who was the commissioner of CBP, Victor Avila, who was a special agent with ICE, who was ambushed by the cartels while he was in Mexico. Of course, people who follow the podcast know that Tom Homan works with us on a regular basis. And, I've got a significant amount of experience doing this kind of stuff as well. And I think if people pay attention to podcasts, what they will see is that there are common threads throughout this whole thing. We don't need any more laws. We just need to enforce the ones that we have. Border security is national security. The U.S. isn't obligated to let any foreign nationals into the United States. The terrorists, the cartels, the foreign governments that dislike us are all working together. Those are all things that we have heard from experts again and again and again. And those are all the common threads that tie this stuff together. And the fact is, as a nation, we need to get serious about these things before it's too late. Because if we continue going in the direction that we're going, it's not a question of if we're going to have another 9/11 type of situation. It's a question of when.
And despite what you hear from the anti-borders crowd about how someone like Kash or someone like Charles, they'll try to frame them as, oh, they're radical and they're extreme or whatever. Everything we heard from Kash today and Charles previously, it's grounded in common sense. It's grounded in the existing law. They're not proposing some wild new type of law that's never been put there before. It's really just the defense of the country, law and order, keeping crime at a manageable level. I haven't heard one thing here that sounded out there. Have you?
No, not at all. I mean, what's radical is the notion that countries should voluntarily erase their borders. I mean, borders are a thing that go back to the Roman Empire, Hadrian's Wall, the Great Wall of China. A lot of people don't realize, in addition to Hadrian's Wall, the Romans used to actually put wooden fence posts in along the borders so that they could identify them. So this whole notion that people live within a set of borders that define the laws and the type of government that they're ruled by is an ancient one. This thing that somehow we in places like the United States have an obligation to ignore our own borders and let anyone who wants to come here for any reason show up uninvited. That's what's radical. That's what's new. And, I like the way Kash put it. We don't need anything new. We just need to take the laws that we have on the books, have a leader in the White House who's serious about enforcing those and apply them, and the situation will correct itself.
Isn't it strange that we and some of the guests we've had, we have to go to such lengths to advocate for what is utterly grounded in common sense when the other side has done the kind of the frog in the boiling pot thing, the slow boiling pot, where they've changed the narrative to the point where anyone who advocates for borders and deporting criminals and things like that, that's now considered the radical view. But doing what they want to do, just utter lawlessness at the border and sanctuary policies, which are utterly toxic, are now considered by them and pushed by them as the responsible, sane, normal thing to do.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, but you have to take into account that the border issue itself isn't an end, it's a means to an end. And the end is to undermine all of the things that go along with border enforcement, with law enforcement. I mean, we're in this situation now where we're so worried about the rights of criminals or the rights of immigration lawbreakers that we're not stopping to think about the fact that the primary job of the United States government is to protect the citizens of the United States, to give them law and order and the stability that allows us all to go about our everyday lives, unmolested, and we're not having to look over our shoulders to make sure that criminals aren't attacking our families or trying to steal whatever we just bought at the mall, those kind of things. And so this is all part of a bigger issue. And I think it goes back to the title we chose for the podcast, No Border, No Country. The border isn't just a line that says, what's America? It does that, but it's also the line that demarcates us from the rest of the world and says, this is the place where the freedoms and the rule of law and order that we're accustomed to in the United States prevail. And we need to protect that if we want to continue to have America.
One of the more blatant examples of that recently was the story we covered about Border Patrol refusing to release the nationalities of terror watch list people at the border because it might be a problem for their rights.
Yeah.
And Americans' rights be damned that we're letting potential terrorists in the country. It just shows in what upside-down world is our government operating like this? I mean, there's no sense of responsibility to the citizens. It's all, well, we can't hurt them.
Well, I mean, the fact is that immigration lawbreakers who came into the country uninvited, who have a history of terrorism, which is a criminal act, they don't have any right implicated there. It's the truth. calling them terrorists. It's not defamatory. It's the truth calling them illegal aliens. That's not defamatory. So it's standing the whole thing on its head. And the fact is that, rights is a word that's overused. And we don't have a right to the government to protect us from every bad thing 24/7. But we do, as citizens and taxpayers, have an expectation that the government is going to fulfill its responsibilities to the citizens. And it's an important point that we, the people, are the government. This is the United States. We have government of the people, by the people, for the people. And we have a reasonable expectation that the government is going to prioritize our interests over those of foreign nationals with no prior connection to the United States who have begun their relationship with the U.S. by violating our laws, which doesn't bode well for how they're going to, the attitude that they're going to take toward American laws in the future of their relationship with this country if we make the mistake of allowing them to stay. So it's just crazy. You're right. The whole thing, it's the world turned upside down and the entire model has been stood on its head.
One thing in closing, when I asked Kash that question about the role courts and litigation are going to play in the future, I think it underscores the importance of a group like IRLI and the fact that they're the only group completely dedicated to fighting this fight.
Yeah, the United States is a country based on the rule of law. The laws apply equally to everybody from the president on down to the lowliest average citizen. And they apply to foreign nationals who come here, whether they are legal migrants or whether they are uninvited guests. And so what IRLI's mission is to preserve that rule of law when it comes to immigration and to ensure that the people here in the D.C. swamp are following the immigration laws that Congress put on the book. It's not the province of the executive branch to ignore the immigration laws. It's not the province of the courts to adjust the immigration laws. It's Congress that should be doing that. And so IRLI puts its foot down in the middle of this whole thing and fights the good fight on behalf of the people of the United States.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Immigration Reform Law Institute, go to IRLI.org. If you found this information useful and you'd like to support the show, go to IRLI.org/podcast. You can also hear this show on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and Spotify. And don't forget to check us out on all the major social media platforms. Thanks again.